Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering half of your savings are worthless, not because of war or famine, but because the people who issued your money deliberately destroyed it for profit. That's exactly what happened in 1621 across dozens of German states. Princes, merchants, and mints colluded in a secret system called Kipper and Wipper, and the consequences were catastrophic. Welcome to the Wealth Timeline, where we uncover how money, power, and history intertwine to shape the world we live in. Today, we're diving into one of the most underreported financial catastrophes in European history, a crisis that didn't just collapse economies, but revealed a fundamental truth about power. When money becomes a weapon, no one is safe. Let's set the stage. It's 1618. The Holy Roman Empire, a patchwork of over 300 semi-independent territories, prince-bishoprics, free cities, and minor kingdoms, is fracturing. The 30 Years' War has just begun, ignited by religious tensions between Catholic and Protestant states. Armies need funding. Mercenaries demand payment in silver. And every prince, duke, and city council faces the same impossible question. How do we finance this war without taxing our people into rebellion? The answer they found was brilliant in its simplicity and catastrophic in its execution. For centuries, European coins had been minted with strict standards. A thaler, the silver coin that would later inspire the word dollar, contained a specific weight of pure silver. Trust in currency was trust in weight and purity. But here's the thing. Minting rights were fragmented. Hundreds of local rulers controlled their own mints, and in times of war, those rules started to bend. At first it was subtle. A prince might reduce the silver content of his coins by 5%, then 10%. The coins still looked the same. They still bore the imperial eagle, but their intrinsic value had quietly eroded. And here's where it gets interesting. If your coins were lighter, but neighboring states still accepted them at face value, you could effectively export inflation while importing real silver. This wasn't stupidity. This was strategy. And once one state started, the others had no choice but to follow, or watch their own silver reserves drain away. By 1620, the game had a name, Kipper and Wipper. A kipping referred to the clipping of coins, shaving off edges, reducing weight. Wipper described the seesaw scales used to sort good coins from bad. But the term also captured something deeper, the violent oscillation between value and worthlessness, the dizzying collapse of monetary trust. And then came the professionals. Enter the Münzkonsortien, the mint consortiums. These were private financiers, often Jewish merchants and foreign investors, who leased minting rights from cash-strapped princes. The deal was simple. The consortium fronted the costs of running the mint, and in return, they kept a percentage of the profit from coin debasement. This wasn't corruption in the shadows. This was official policy. Between 1621 and 1623, over 300 mints operated across the Holy Roman Empire, many of them temporary, unregulated, and churning out coins at breakneck speed. In Saxony alone, the silver content of the groschen fell from 25% to less than 3% in under 18 months. In some regions, coins that had once been 90% silver were now 90% copper, thinly washed with silver to maintain appearances. The mechanism was devastatingly efficient. Merchants would bring old, high-quality coins to the mint. The mint would melt them down, extract the silver, and reissue new coins with far less precious metal, but the same nominal value. The difference? Pure profit, split between the mint operator and the ruling authority. But here's the critical twist. No one wanted to be left holding the bad coins. So a secondary market emerged. Coin sorters, the Wipper, would sit in marketplaces with scales, testing every coin. Good coins were hoarded or smuggled out. Bad coins flooded circulation. Gresham's law kicked in with ruthless precision. Bad money drove out good. By mid-1622, the velocity of money accelerated wildly. Prices doubled, then tripled, then quintupled. A loaf of bread that cost 4 pfennigs in 1621 cost 40 by 1623. Wages couldn't keep pace. Savings evaporated. The peasantry, paid in debased coins but forced to pay taxes in silver weight equivalents, found themselves trapped in an impossible squeeze. And the elites? They converted their wealth into land, foreign currency, and precious metals, hedging against the very crisis they had engineered. This wasn't just inflation, this was monetary warfare. Each state trying to export its crisis while protecting its own reserves. The empire was eating itself from within. By late 1622, the system had reached terminal velocity. The city of Magdeburg, one of the wealthiest trade hubs in Northern Europe, saw its currency lose 80% of its value in 6 months. Food riots erupted. Guild workers marched on city halls, demanding payment in old good coins, a phrase that became a rallying cry across the empire. In Prague, the imperial court watched in horror as soldiers refused to fight unless paid in foreign ducats. Mercenary armies began looting not enemy territory, but the very regions they were supposed to defend, because the coins they received were worthless. The political consequences were immediate. In 1623, Emperor Ferdinand II issued the Münzedikt, a desperate imperial decree attempting to restore order. It banned private mints, mandated minimum silver content, and authorized the confiscation of debased coins. But enforcement was nearly impossible. Local princes ignored the edict, mints kept operating. The damage was already done. Economic historians estimate that between 1621 and 1623, the real value of circulating currency in the empire fell by 70 to 80%. This wasn't a gradual decline. This was a collapse compressed into 24 months. The Kipper und Wipper period destroyed more purchasing power than the first decade of the 30 Years' War. But here's the darkest irony. The crisis didn't end because governments restored discipline. It ended because there was nothing left to debase. The mints had extracted so much silver that further debasement became pointless. The system ate itself and starved. By 1624, the consortiums dissolved. The temporary mints closed. And Central Europe was left with a shattered monetary system, a traumatized population, and an economy that wouldn't fully recover for decades. If this sounds like ancient history, look closer. The mechanics of Kipper and Wipper, currency debasement, sovereign debt monetization, the weaponization of money supply, are alive and well in the 21st century. When governments today engage in quantitative easing, they're not clipping coins, they're expanding digital balance sheets. When central banks purchase sovereign debt with newly created reserves, they're transferring wealth from savers to debtors, just as the 17th century mints did. The tools have changed, the incentives haven't. Consider Venezuela between 2016 and 2020, a modern Kipper and Wipper, where currency collapsed not from war, but from deliberate monetary expansion to finance government spending. Or Zimbabwe in 2008, where hyperinflation reached 89.7 sextillion% year over year, a debasement spiral that destroyed an entire economy. Even in stable economies, the erosion is real. The US dollar has lost over 95% of its purchasing power since the Federal Reserve's creation in 1913. The process is slower, more controlled, and more socially acceptable, but the transfer of wealth from currency holders to currency issuers follows the same ancient logic. And here's the uncomfortable insight. Kipper and Wipper succeeded precisely because it was decentralized and competitive. Each state acted rationally within its own incentives. The tragedy was structural, not moral. Sound familiar? So what do we learn from Kipper and Wipper? First, currency is only as stable as the institutions that issue it. And when those institutions face existential pressure, monetary discipline is always the first casualty. Second, inflation is not a natural disaster, it's a policy choice, and its architects are rarely the ones who suffer its consequences. Third, financial crises don't announce themselves with sirens. They creep forward, coin by coin, policy by policy, until the collapse feels inevitable, because it already happened. The Kipper and Wipper period lasted less than 3 years, but its scars lasted generations. And the lesson it teaches is timeless. And when money becomes a weapon, trust becomes the casualty. And once trust is gone, no empire, no matter how powerful, can survive. Because in the timeline of wealth, every rise comes with a hidden cost. If you enjoyed uncovering this hidden story, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the Wealth Timeline, and turn on the bell icon, because history's next secret is already unfolding.